I think the underlying reason why we are dying early is because we don't plan and we don't take our data seriously. And why do I say so? I say so because this data has always been available in plain sight. And I've always said the best way to deceive the Ghanaian is to hide things in plain sight. Put it in front of them and they will not look at it. The data hasn't come from anywhere. It's come from our birth and deaths registry and from our Ghana Statistical Service demographic data. The only reason why the noise has started is because myself and Dr. Chie Champon started looking at the data based on the conversation. I mean, something happened in May when I was in Ghana, where I was walking in Kumasi around Kejetia. And there's this popular place where they put up posters of obituaries. Yeah. And then I realized that a lot of the people who were there were between 40 and 60 years. And I found it strange. So I was talking to Theo and we were like, and Theo was like, yes, I mean, we need to look into this. So when we saw the both data, I decided to go from the demographics and look, and Theo decided to go from the mortality data from our births and deaths registration. Bottom line, I came up with 38% of Ghanaians dying between 40 and 60 years, and Theo came up with 40% from two different sets of data. So the question we started asking ourselves is, if we can spend the time combing the data and model it and come up with this data, how come we don't know as a country? And then we decided to do something else by looking at what we call the disease burden patterns. So like you were saying, that the hypertension and diabetes, like Justice said, 10, 15 years ago, were not in the top 10. At what point did they start creeping in? And at what point did the malarias and typhoid fevers and dysentery start sliding down? And we realized that started happening around 2007. So the question then becomes, what have we been doing with this data? Because it's not like the data is not there. Then the next thing we looked at is what we call quality adjusted life years. What it simply means is, even if you are going to live to 64.5 years, what percentage of those years would you be healthy and not in and out of the hospital? And we realized that Ghana's quality adjusted health years was 58 years. So technically, you would live to 64.5, but you would be unwell for almost 7 of those years, 6.5 years. And then we said, finally, let's look at the last thing, which is called avoidable death statistics. Basically, what that means is, what is the global average life expectancy? It's 72 years. So anybody who dies on this planet below 72 years is considered by the WHO of having died an avoidable death. And we realized that 95% of Ghanaians are dying avoidable deaths. Because as you said, only 2 in 10 of us would live to 70. So we're like, whoa, initially we didn't want to put anything out. We were discussing it amongst ourselves. And we're like, no, this is something that needs to become a generalized conversation. And then we realized that others had started publishing it because we put it out on Facebook. And news portals had started looking at the website. The question I asked myself was, how come we are dying between 40 and 60 years? Almost 2/3 of the population are dying between 40 and 60 years, and we are doing nothing about it. My brother and Justice have talked about all the contributory factors, but the bottom line, if you look at NCD strategy globally, is to keep the patient or the population as healthy as possible for as long as possible, so that they don't drift from primary into secondary care. Because globally, secondary care, tertiary care, you are getting closer to your grave because they are expensive. The only way you can do that is mass screening. There has been no other way. If you look at Rwanda, for example, they have had an NCD protocol which is costed and part of their budget for the past 15 years. You look at their document and it's actually costed. We'll spend X on this, Y on this, blah, blah, blah. And it is tied to their national budget. Because you know what? They said that the productivity losses as a result of these deaths were too much for them to ignore. As a result, they've moved from a 44-year life expectancy in 1993 to 69 years, surpassing us along the way. When I started pointing some of this data, some people said, well, when you're raising life expectancy from a lower, a bar to a higher bar, you can do it quickly, which is true, because obviously you are coming from a lower threshold and you are using averages, so you can do it quickly. Once they surpassed us, I started asking those people, so what contributes for them overtaking us and accelerating? when we've stagnated between 63 and 65 years for about 9 years. The truth of the matter is, because when you are coming up, you can accelerate because your threshold is low and the average is high. What you need to do to accelerate is, once you get to your life expectancy, majority of your population, 64%, must die above your life expectancy. So, for example, if Ghana wants to move to 72 years, we should certainly have at least 64% of our mortalities happening above 64.5 years. How much is happening there? No. From 60 to 65, 70% are dying. Why is it that? Because those people are already in secondary and tertiary care, and we don't have the specialists. So unless and until we are intentional to actually prevent the people from moving into from primary to secondary care by screening and using what we call lower level health cadres. So you're talking about not using the doctors, consultants, specialists, because we don't have just enough. But getting people who can take basic things, blood pressure, body mass index, your height and your weight, cholesterol, fasting sugar, and screening these people and having a portal of a sort to put the data in so that they can be identified. Because you know what? In the very smart countries, they don't just screen to find the people who have the undiagnosed, because a lot of these diseases are undiagnosed. They also screen to find those who are on the journey to become hypertensive or diabetics. So you would see that in the UK, they would tell you that once you are 40, you get a letter which says go for a screening, what we call a health check. And some people would be said to be borderline obese, overweight. Some people would be said to be on the hypertensive threshold, and they would be told, measure your blood pressure at this point specifically. Okay. So that the minute you fall into the band, you are put on low dose treatment. Because what happens is, you can put a person on simple treatments, simple medication treatment, one tablet, and it will keep them out of the way as long as they are doing their routine checkups with their doctor for up to 10, 20 years. And they wouldn't move into secondary care. So it is the lack of planning and our inability to comb our own data we collect that has gotten us here. And as long as we don't stop, 40% of us will die between the age of 40 to 60 because the data is too skewed towards the bottom.